Donna, have you ever experienced racism in your life?
Yeah, I have experienced it from early childhood. In elementary school, I grew up, well, I was born in 1959, so in elementary school it was during the time of the Vietnam War, and I believe this is one of the things that it just sticks in my mind so much that it has affected me, that I would have children call me names because when they looked at me, they couldn't figure out what I was. I had I guess an Asian look about me, and during that time, everybody hated anyone that looked Asian. So I would get picked on and get called names like chink and gook, and it upset me. So I went home to my mom and told her what happened, and she said, "Well, you're not those things. You need to tell those kids that you're an American Indian," which at the time the term American Indian was the proper term. And so I would go back and tell them, I'm not a chink, I'm not a gook, I'm an American Indian. And then they started teasing me about that, calling me savage and half-breed and do the woo-woo-woo thing. Well, with my kids, they also went to a school that had a mascot, which was even worse than being called the Indians. And it was the R word, and which is it's a racial slur. It's a demeaning term, and I just felt like by them being in a school where that was allowed, where that they allowed a racial slur to be their mascot, to represent them, I had to speak up. My older son, he went through school, and I didn't speak up. I was younger. I wasn't quite as secure, I guess, and I just felt like I didn't have a chance. If I spoke up, something bad might happen. I was scared. So when my younger son went to school, so many years later, because there's 16 years in between, when he went to the high school, and then I went to back to school night, and I saw Redskin, and I saw the pictures, and I saw it everywhere. And I thought, oh my gosh, 16 years later, it's 2012, and we're still doing this. And it just hit me. I just couldn't contain myself. That very night, I didn't go there with any intentions of, addressing it. But that very night, I said, I will not be quiet about this. So I spoke to the assistant principal right then and said, why do you allow that? And he said, well, that's our mascot, that's our name. And I said, well, do you allow other racial slurs? And he said, no. And I said, well, then why do you allow this one? I said, would you allow the kids to say the N-word, any form of it? And he said, no, we do not allow any form of the word. And I said, why? He said, because somebody that hears it might be offended, might be hurt. I said, well, don't you think I'm hurt right now that this school allows a racial slur for my people and you celebrate it and you promote it? And he said, well, I guess we're going to have to address that issue.
And how long ago was that?
That was September 2012.
And right now we're in June of 2017, and the school still has that mascot?
Yes, yes. And they celebrate it, and they have, it is in events. I mean, they have a Mr. Redskins contest, and they, at football games, kids, they paint their chests with the word, and they put feathers and paint on their bodies. Girls wearing full headdresses. That would be like having a mascot of the Pope and having kids dress up like the Pope. How offensive would that be?
Mm-hmm. Have you thought about any possible explanation in your own mind and heart of how you witness this difference between a school who can recognize racism for some groups, but for some reason cannot recognize the racism for Indigenous people, for Native American people?
I think because of hearing so much about it's their tradition and it's their history, that they feel like I'm taking something away from them. They think that that it belongs to them, it's their tradition and their history, and I'm going to take it. And they don't care that there's hundreds of years of Native history that they've ignored, and that they're ignoring Native voices, hundreds and thousands of Native voices who are speaking up, and tribes that are speaking up, saying we don't want to be portrayed this way. And I mean, I've gotten letters from tribal chiefs, and taken it to people, authority figures in the school, and they ignore it. Mm-hmm. I should not have to fight hard or fight at all to be protected under, like discrimination and harassment policies that they have at the school. Why do I have to fight for myself and for my children to be protected when everybody else is protected? Mm-hmm. And I think that these people think that when I ask to be equal, it takes something away from them. So I think their version of equal is better than mm-hmm. me, or mm-hmm. better than a Native person. Mm-hmm. So if I'm equal, then what are they? Mm-hmm. I've taken something from them. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to understand because you're dealing with educators, you're dealing with superintendents, you're dealing with school boards who all swore, they have a duty to every child in that school, to every person that walks through those doors. It's about education, and I know one of the things that, we've all come up with, because Natives, we all talk about it and we try to figure it out. It's because they think of Natives or Indians as strong warriors, savages, everything that represents toughness. Because for a football team or a sports team, you want to be thought of as tough, you want to be bloodthirsty, you want to be a savage. Well, we don't want to be thought of as savages. We don't want to be thought of as bloodthirsty. We just want to be equal, that's all.
So, Donna, I understand that you've been really working for 4 years now to try to educate your local community, the school where your boys went. Mm-hmm. Why do you think you've been able to continue this cause?
Well, I went there very, naively, thinking that when I went to the school board or when I spoke to the principal, I was very naive, and I thought, well, gee, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell them, do you realize that your mascot is a racial slur? And I thought that they were going to say, oh my gosh, we didn't know. We're going to change it. We'll really look into this because we're educators and we're supposed to be doing right by children. I very quickly found out that they would do everything in their power to ignore me, lie to me, push me away. And so I wasn't going to let them ignore it. I wasn't going to let a school teach children the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. You have to teach children about honor and about respect and empathy. And it's in my soul that I have to do this. Native Americans couldn't speak up for themselves years ago. Natives had to be quiet and do what they were told just to survive, or you would be killed. I don't have to worry about being killed. I can speak up. I'm allowed to speak up now. Yes, I will be threatened. Yes, I will be argued with. I will be ignored. But I will not be silent. When I have the safety, I have a voice, and I can speak up for all those people that couldn't speak in the past. So I have to do this. Mm-hmm. I have no choice. Mm-hmm. And I expect a school board, an administration, principals, teachers to do their duty. They have a responsibility to provide a learning environment free from racism, discrimination, safe place for every single student. And I am holding them to that. Mm-hmm. I'm dedicated to holding them to that. I will not give up on this. And I promised people, I promised my Native brothers and sisters across this country who are supporting me that I will not give up on that, and I will not until it's fixed. When you are thought of as a thing or not a real person, it affects you. And I know as a child how it affected me, and as an adult I know how it affects me, and I don't want any child to ever feel like that again. I don't want a Native child to ever feel that they're not represented or that they're not worth fighting for. I'm going to fight for them.
Pastor, how do you see the use of Native American mascots impacting your community?
My tribe, the confederation that we're a part of, the Nanticoke-Lenape Confederation, two of the intertribal organizations, or government organizations that we're a part of, the Alliance of Colonial Era Tribes and the National Congress of American Indians, all agree on the psychological damage that American Indian mascots have on American Indian students and families. To have your culture mocked is an awful thing. To have to deal with that as a child, and to be outnumbered vastly, and to have even your teachers and adults and alumni of your school mock your culture, take symbols that are of a spiritual nature in many instances, or are restricted for only certain individuals or certain families, or mixing, northeastern and southwestern culture as though they're the same, and wearing some garb or costume, is damaging psychologically. Now, people love to point out to me certain exceptions, and there are always going to be some exceptions to certain rules. You may have those few instances where a tribe has worked with the local community and there is some symbol that they have found acceptable. But one of the things that the studies that I am mentioning, the organizations that have done studies have uncovered, is that even if the symbol or the logo or the mascot is acceptable, it encourages behaviors that become unacceptable and racist, and leave many American Indians feeling unsafe, insulted. You're not only insulting them, you're insulting their ancestors. And it's ironic to me that oftentimes the groups that do this will say, we're honoring you. And when they are told you're not, it's an insult, and you're hurting our children, the response is not repentance, it's outrage. And we have had elders shouted down and insulted and verbally accosted, oftentimes when they've been asked to come in and just give an opinion on these issues. So it is something that the non-native public needs to really reconsider and think about what they're doing. And if it was happening to any other racial group, against their will, stereotyping them in a particular way, it would be found intolerable. It would be shouted down. But for some reason, it's okay to insult indigenous people.